This is a tree I really like. It's called lacy oak, and it's a native here in Texas. And as you could see, it's very healthy, doing very well here. But it's starting to have a few more galls on it than I like to see. I don't like to see any kind of concentration like this. A few galls on the plant, whatever it is, generally no problem. But when they start being concentrated and you see a little insect damage, you think something is wrong with my tree. There's a stress problem. Well, I think I know what it is, and that's what we're going to talk about today, is how to fix a stressful situation in a tree that's caused by it being too deep in the ground. Yes, this one's too deep in the ground. There's a little bit of flare showing, but not enough. Even though it's my tree, it can happen to anyone. And what I wanted to show today is how you can expose the flare of a tree with home tools if you can't afford or don't want to deal with an arborist and a tree spade, an air spade or an air knife, which are commercial tools and really the very best way to go. But there's an alternative, and that's what I'll show you how to use today. And I only want you doing this work if you'll promise to be very careful, because you can do damage to the tree. Some of the tools that I use, this is a Japanese gardening knife. It's called a hori hori, which means in Japanese dig, dig. Mine looks a little rusty, doesn't it? That's because I just found it. I've lost it for a while. But you can use it to start removing some of the soil and grass, being very careful to not damage the flare or damage any of the roots. That's the key, and it's easy to do with hard tools. The other tool I like to use is a small mattock. You see here, they're a little bit hard to find. One of my listeners made this one for me some years ago, but it's a good way to get started. The first thing you do is just remove the grass and be very, very careful in doing this around the tree. Now, other tools you can use, and as you can see, it might take a while to do it, but that's fine. It's very beneficial. Big brushes. I've talked to people a lot about the horse brush. That's what that is. Very stiff bristles, and you can use it very effectively, especially if there's moisture in the soil like you see here. Here's one I found at the hardware store. Nice stiff bristles. Here's one a little longer I found at one of the hardware stores. But what you need to do is actually rough up the soil a little bit and then brush it away. There's another thing you can do that'll go a little bit faster, and we'll show you how to use a blower, a leaf blower, to help you with this process in just a little bit too. And one of the things I should show you at this point is to speed up the process, you can use a blower. This is a battery, lithium powered battery blower from steel, very powerful. Once that soil is loosened enough, this is an effective way to speed up the process. And then you just begin loosening more soil. You can see the flare coming out here, so you want to be very careful working around the flares that you start to see. That's where the brushes can come in handy, because they won't damage the flare and the roots. Got the bulk of the soil off with the hand tools, using them very, very carefully. You can see that the flare's starting to show there. We want the flare to, actually, the truth about it is that I used to recommend a flare, but now I recommend a dramatic flare. And it just takes a little bit more work, and it's much, much better for the health of the tree. try to do this without scarring any of the flare at all. You can also use large tools if you like to stand up. It's better for the old knees. You could start the work with a longer tool. It's more powerful. Go faster. Again, be extremely careful when you're close to the tree. Loosen it up. Use a brush again, or a blower. Doing the work a little bit at a time, and I don't mind on my own property, so I don't mind recommending it to you either, is to blow the soil out in the turf or in the beds. You just want to be careful not to cover up the stem of another woody plant somewhere and create a problem while you're solving one. One more thing that you could consider, again, if you're extremely careful, is to use a sharpshooter or some kind of a spade to do the first wave of removal of the grass or the soil out on the top. And again, you need to be very careful to try to keep from hitting the flare and the base of the plant. You'll do a lot of damage. Not irreparable. The exposure of the flare is actually more important than a few nicks, but just try to keep it to a minimum. Another thing you need to do as you go, these small roots like this that are growing up, those are roots trying to reach up to the air. They're not part of the main flares, and for the most part you cut all of this away. Sometimes it'll be really mass and look like spaghetti, and you need to take all of that away. Here is very little. This tree wasn't extremely deep in the soil, as you saw, so there'll be some of that. And you can do it as you go, or you can wait until the end to do it. Okay, I think you get the picture. At least I hope that helped. Again, the better way to go would be to get an arborist to do this work with an air spade. But if you can't afford it, don't want to do it, it can be done with the hard tools, brushes, and blowers if you are very careful. You can see that I nicked it a little bit, but not too badly. Some small nicks. This was a wound that was already there. That wasn't me. But you can see the flare. We've taken off 4 inches or so, 4, maybe 5 inches. You could actually go a little deeper than this if you want to be very aggressive, or you can take a little bit more off every few years. I've done that on some trees, and the trees I've done that on have just responded beautifully. It's amazing how they'll take off and be more productive the very first growing season. This one will probably kick off these galls that it has a little bit too heavy and grow even better than it has so far. So again, be extremely careful, get the soil off the flares. These spaghetti roots that are coming up, trim all them away. If any circling and girdling roots exist, which we were lucky here we didn't have that, we'll show you that in another video. But if they're there, they need to be taken off, chiseled out, cut out, just like a bad limb in the top of the tree. I hope that helps you. And as one final word about all this, you can do this work any time of the year. It's best to do it in the fall. Winter is perfectly fine. Probably the worst time is what we just did, early summer, when it's nice and humid. But the point is, you can do it any time of the year. It doesn't matter. It won't bother the tree at all. You need to be a little bit careful around brand new trees. But I just wanted to show you how to do it at home, because this is the thing that I recommend more than anything to get trees out of stress and bring them back into health so they produce up to their potential. This exposure of the root flare or the trunk flare or base work or whatever you want to call it is simply the most important thing you can do relative to the health of trees.